Seven on Sundays podcast is intended for mature audiences. Episodes discuss sensitive and fraught topics that many teens and 20-somethings face, but may be triggering. The content may not be suitable for all audience members. Please take caution when listening.
I thought that desire would lead to love, that kind of like, I wanted to be loved. I didn't want to be desired, and I don't think I registered that at the time. I realized that now, looking back on that experience, like I wasn't, and I was actually being controlled by someone. I think anyone can kind of coerce you or, manipulate you into doing something you don't necessarily want to do, but then you're kind of stuck with those choices for the rest of your life. I am so angry that I let you treat me like this. I'm so disappointed that I let you do that to me, especially since we've had so much history. Like, I thought you valued me. I thought you loved me.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are tuning in. We are so glad that you could join us for this episode of Seven on Sundays. I am Stephanie Boye, your host. I'm a sex educator, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Chez Leeby, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. We talk to young people anonymously about the things that are happening in their lives, the things that are often taboo and hard to hear. Today, we are excited to be talking to Sophie, and we are really excited to hear her story. For those of you who may have done OnlyFans, may have done stripping, may have done any kind of what most people might consider innocent sex work. This is very interesting story, and it's really important because there's another person involved in her story. And I think most people would be interested to hear how innocently trafficking can happen at the hands of people that we know and that we care about.
I also want to let people know that even if you haven't done OnlyFans, which I think is really important that we all know what that is and how that works, but if you're in any kind of relationship that feels codependent, and we're going to talk in the wrap up about codependency, but if you're in any relationship where you are doing things against your better judgment, your gut, your will to please another person, please listen to this because we're going to offer some insights, and Sophie offers insights to that kind of relationship.
All right, let's jump right into Sophie's story.
Welcome, listeners. Welcome, Sophie, to the show. And let's hear whatever you want to share about your story. We're ready. We're excited.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so the main reason I'm here, I think, is just because you guys talk a lot, about relationship with porn and OnlyFans and all of these things. And I feel like I have an interesting story, a common story I like to share. So, like, when I turned 18, like, a boy that I knew very well, he was my friend. Like, knew him since I was 15, someone I really trusted. He told me, he was like, "Oh, I think, you're very beautiful. I think you would do really well, making an OnlyFans, you could make a lot of money." And I had a big crush on him, like a really big crush on him. And I think part of the reason I said yes was because I wanted him to like me, which sounds a little crazy saying that, but I think I took that as a compliment and made me feel really validated. And he was like, "Oh, I can help you run it. It'll be so fun and interesting, and like, we can do this together." So I thought that that was something I really wanted, like a way for me and him to get connected. And it turned out to not be as, glamorous as I pictured it. And it seemed like it was a lot more like a controlling relationship. Like, it started off with him creating a fake name for me, and that kind of felt like it was so interesting because it was like a little alter ego, and I felt, sexy and cool and wild and free, and like I was, gaining confidence in my body. But I realized that now, looking back on that experience, like I wasn't, and I was actually being controlled by someone. So I think that's like the main thing I wanted to share was like I went through that experience. It was only maybe like 6 months of doing OnlyFans, but I didn't register how like taxing that was for my just well-being and like relationship with men and my trust in other people as well. So it took a while to unpack, I feel like. But yeah, so him and I basically had this kind of, I don't know, relationship in a way. In my head, it was, a way for me to get close to him, which I really liked. But actually doing OnlyFans, and if you don't know what OnlyFans is, it's like a platform for anyone to post sexual content, or I think any kind of content. I think it's mostly advertised, for at least women to make money, you know, posting whatever they like. And so in my eyes, it seems, very empowering and very like, oh, I can, make money from this and really feel confident in myself, own my sexuality, all of those things. But in reality, I think it did a lot more damage than, what was presented to me. And again, I was 18 years old, so I really, kind of jumped in that choice, and that's something that is going to stick with me forever. So I think that is kind of a big aspect of why I'm here and why I'm wanting to share my story, just because, I think anyone can kind of coerce you or, you know, manipulate you into doing something you don't necessarily want to do, but then you're kind of stuck with those choices for the rest of your life.
I know from working with students at the university that I think it's like literally maybe 1 to 2 degrees of separation from most students to somebody who has done some form of, and I say sex work very loosely because
Mhm.
this is not sex work in the way that people would traditionally think about sex work being prostitution or pornography or something like that. But it falls under that because you're sort of delivering fantasy to whoever your subscribers are. And for parents who don't understand OnlyFans, it's basically a subscriber base that you'll you, Sophie, were a creator along with your friend. I don't know what we want to call him, Adam.
Sure.
So we'll call him Adam. You, along with Adam, were considered the creators,
Mhm.
and people will pay a subscription amount. So maybe it's $9 every, month, and basically they can ask things of you. Is that correct?
Exactly, and I think that is a good point too, like, a lot of times you kind of just assume because there's normally just a girl in the, picture or the video that it's just one person running it, but most of the time it is, 2 people, there's like a team of people promoting it and doing all these behind the scene things. But for me personally, like, Adam and I, mainly him, he created a menu and, put a price on, specifically what would be done, and we did have conversations of what I was comfortable with. I'm putting air quotes around comfortable just because I feel like I wasn't comfortable with really any of it, but I did stipulate that I did not want my face in any of the pictures or videos, like, wouldn't use my name, any of that, and there was a lot of push to, like, show my face, he'd be like, "Oh, we'd make a lot more money," and so that's where I did kind of say no to a lot of things, but I do feel like I was pushed to do a lot more than I actually wanted to, especially when it came to conversing with the men. Like it would be like, "Oh, you need to, talk dirtier or say, certain things, really make them because they're paying for it." And that was something I didn't necessarily grasp when I agreed to it, like the level of communication and I thought it would just kind of be posting photos and, people would comment and, whatever, but it was very personal kind of conversations with people that I wasn't comfortable with, let alone having someone that, I valued and wanted, you know, relationship with to see those conversations.
Let's talk about that for a quick second. So you thought that it would be empowering, and would you say after having done it that you like did the first time you do it, did it feel empowering?
I think I had the idea that it was empowering, and I think a long time afterward, I did think it was not, I don't know if empowering is the right word because I definitely felt shame about it, but I think that I kind of owned it as like this crazy wild thing that I did. Like, oh, I'm just so, out there and fun and crazy. Like I did this thing. Isn't that so wild of me? But then, when you really look at it, it's like, okay, well, I didn't really actually want to do that. And so I think that was just kind of a way for me to come to terms with my actions and just like the situation in general. But I think that not empowered, but desired. And I think that I interchanged that like empowerment at like that desire as empowerment, and it's not, in at least in my opinion.
We talked about this a little bit before we got on about that sort of like dichotomy of the want to be desired, and I think any person can relate to that, male or female can relate to that one, especially at that age, wanting to be desired versus what I think that happens when you do something like that, because I imagine having to say sexualized kind of dirty talk to a bunch of strangers is probably what didn't feel good to you. I'm imagining.
Yeah, no, that was exactly it. Like, in theory, it's awesome. I this was a way for me to make money, this was a way for me to get closer to Adam, and this was a way for me to feel confident in my body. I think that was a main thing too for me. Like, I've struggled with body positivity and just, like, accepting the way I looked, and I think it was really, at first, rewarding getting all this male but mostly male attention, being like, "Oh, you're so beautiful," like, all of a lot more dirty things than that, but it was for a second, it was very like, "Okay, no, like, I do feel good," but I think that again, or even to build off of what I said, the whole desire thing, I also, I think because I was so young, I thought that desire would lead to love, that kind of like I wanted to be loved, I didn't wanna be desired, and I don't think I registered that at the time.
Yeah, that is a really great insight.
I have a question, Sophie. Were you dating Adam during this time? Like, what was the nature of your relationship, or was it a crush and he was just kind of orchestrating this?
Yeah, so we have very interesting history, and at that time, I know I was trying to think back, actually, we were dating. I don't know if we were, like, I know after this, we ended up, like, hooking up and then dated, which is crazy to even say, but before that, he was my friend, like, I knew him from, like, my first job. I was 15, he was older than me, like, would drive me to school every day, like, him and I were very close, and I would tell him all my problems. I very much trusted, respected, and valued his opinion, so when he told me, "Oh, you would be good at this. Oh, I wanna do this with you," I very much trusted that guidance and that, you know he phrased it as, "I wanna help you," and I think that that's where I was like, "Absolutely. I would love to do this with you." But then the more I did it and I sat with it, I realized that it was all just kind of manipulation, and I don't necessarily know if he was ever aware of what he was doing, but he did it, and it has lasting effects.
I think if you watched Andrew Tate at all, this is literally right out of a playbook from Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate, for anybody who listens that is not familiar, if there's a parent listening, I think most young people know who he is, but Andrew Tate is a rather despicable character who is now under house arrest in Budapest for trafficking women. And this is what happened. He literally created this Hustlers University, and he created a degree in Hustlers University called Pimp and Hose degree or something like that. And his literally his exact modus operandi was you meet someone, you make them kind of your girlfriend, you suggest to them that maybe they try this, they can make some money, and then you tell them that you're going to be able to help them to make as much money as possible, and that you share the money with them or you take it all. This is literally right out of the handbook of Andrew Tate, which is, as you can see, it's manipulative. I mean, this is actually trafficking. I mean, this is trafficking 101.
And that's the thing too, is it is like, if I think that's kind of my main point, is if I were to do this myself solely, I don't think I would have half of, the shame that I do about what happened. Like the fact that I had to have someone manage me or, promote me, like I couldn't or put a price on, services I would do. Like that's to me not rating. And I'm a fully capable, like I'm an adult, I can fully do that myself. So I don't that is, I think, something that I'm still trying to grasp is like, why did he think that I needed help doing that if he thought I was so, you know, sexy and good at what I do.
I mean, that is a powerful understanding that it's degrading that he put a price on the things that you would do for other people.
And then it also just feels like, I mean, again, he was promoting me on, like, Twitter or whatever, but I felt like I was giving him a cut of this money that he didn't earn, you know? He wasn't talking to those men, he wasn't taking pictures of his body, and it was all me, and I think that that part really sunk in later on instead of, actually being in it was like, wow, I let him take. I mean, we didn't even make that much money. I think we did it for maybe 6 months and I made $100-ish, something like that. And he took part of that. So it is something like I risked, my I don't know, vulnerability and he still got a percentage of that. So that to me has makes me feel very icky.
I'm so grateful that you're sharing this because I feel like, at least in the parent world, they don't really understand how quickly and easily this goes down and how quickly and easily it can go down a road of you're completely out of control. Like, you know,
Yeah.
not knowing where it's going to lead and what the next is, or control of the money, or control of any of that. And I
Mhm.
think that, it's very enlightening to understand because these new platforms are gonna keep kind of popping up, when one thing gets changed, something new comes along. So this is really helpful. And you were young, and to have the insight that, I just wanted to be desired or validated or seen or liked or any of those things, to have that internal insight right now, as you're stepping back,
Mhm.
that's really mature and important for you, and an important, unfortunate lesson to get there the way you got there. But I wondered about that, like the history before this. Did you feel in your life before that age that it was hard for you to make your own decisions, or not people please, or kind of, feel into your own decision making?
I mean, I think I've always been a people pleaser. My mom is a big people pleaser too, and so I definitely inherit those traits and, mirrored that. I think it's mainly with men that I do this. I think it is mainly I kind of I figured out that it is just because I want validation, I want to be accepted. But I do find myself with men, like, trying to, do whatever I can to make them happy, especially when I'm thinking about someone romantically or I have a crush on someone, I do that. It's less, in public and in situations, with women, like, I think I'm a lot better at, really speaking my mind, but when it comes to, like, confronting a man, like, I never confronted Adam about this, which to me, that is, I think, the most disappointing thing about this whole thing is I dated him for maybe, like, a year, and we never talked about it, and I was so nervous to say something, and I was so nervous to tell him that made me uncomfortable just doing OnlyFans in general, so I never talked to him about it, and now we're broken up, and he has those, the passwords, and he has control over that still, and to me, it's like if I didn't have that people pleasing, trait, I think I would have been a lot more, comfortable sharing how I actually felt and standing up for myself. And I think that is the main thing because that's so common in women, especially college girls in relationships. I see it all the time with my friends. Everyone, they're doing something because they want the guy to be happy, or they're hiding their inner emotions, to please someone. And I think that that can be detrimental, especially in situations like this.
For sure. Okay, I want to ask you this. This has to be loud, clear, real. What would you say if you have the opportunity to say absolutely anything to Adam? What is your heart's desire that you would like to say to him? And it can include curse words, we'll bleep them out, whatever you want to say. I would really like to hear that.
You, sorry. Right? I think that's, like, the main thing is I am so angry that I let him you treat me like this. I'm so disappointed that I let you do that to me, especially since we've had so much history. Like, I thought you valued me, I thought you loved me, and yet you all you've ever done is use me. And so I think that's what I would say. Genuinely, like, I don't necessarily have a lot of anger now just because it's so removed from, like, him specifically, but I've been so angry at him for so long, and I think it's just like, the OnlyFans is just a perfect example of, just so many things that have happened, especially in a relationship, I just never talked about it, and I just kinda blew it under the rug, and it was always like, I've been feeling used, and I think I've ever known how to address that. That's like a icky feeling, especially when it's someone you love.
It's hard to accept that somebody that you love would take advantage of you
Definitely.
and would put a price on you, frankly, right? Like,
Yeah, and I think especially too, the way it was framed at the time was, "I wanna help you. I'm doing this because I feel like I can do something for you. I wanna," it was he had this kind of mentality of like, "I'm gonna protect you. I'm gonna, you know, treat you so good. Like, we're gonna do this together." And that was just not the case. He wasn't protecting me. If anything, he was doing the opposite of that, you know?
can we
Absolutely.
talk about that for a second? Because clearly, the way I see it, you were what, 18 years old
Yeah.
and he was 20.
Yes.
I mean, when you're 18 and someone's 20, while that doesn't sound like a big power, like how, like age difference, it's actually quite a huge age difference because you were probably coming right from your parents' house. You probably still lived in your parents' house,
Mhm.
maybe. And this is somebody who is like in the world. I remember being
Yeah.
in high school and thinking that anyone in college was like so old and mature and wise so I think you have to remember that an 18-year-old's brain in their parents' home when your whole life is controlled by your parents pretty much, somebody outside, even that 1 year outside of high school feels like a big deal.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point, especially because at the time I was a senior in high school. And I mean, we were from the same town and everything, but he went away to college. So that again, like that was the way for me to feel close to him. But I did. I thought I think I like had this mentality of, oh, he's so much older. He knows much more than I do, like, he's so mature and he's so caring, he's taking the time to, like, do this with me, which
Yes.
kinda crazy to think about now, especially because 'cause I'm 21 and I'm looking back, and I would never in my life, put anyone younger in that position.
Right, and as a 21-year-old, like, what is that is like, to you look
Mhm.
back on them and you're like, "Oh my god, I knew who I was 2 years ago, 3 years ago," and you're so vulnerable to other people. So I'd like to take just a minute and go, what would you like to say to a young girl out there? Because I think it's interesting that you with the beauty and you with the body and you with all of the capital, if you will, to
Yeah.
sell on OnlyFans, handed over part of your power to this person.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, I think it seems very, like, it seems like a good idea. It seems like they market to women and just like society in general. Like this is a okay thing to do. And I'm not saying it's not okay. I'm just saying that you have to really evaluate why you're doing it and who you're doing it with. For me personally, I was doing it because I wanted someone to like me. That was the basis of it. I wasn't doing it for, my personal gain. I wasn't doing it because like I needed money at the time. And those were all pluses, but that wasn't the reason I was doing it. And I think especially for young girls, like, I would tell them to just be so careful and speak their mind about like, if you get a feeling, say the feeling, because I think I shoved all of those down, and I really had to do a lot of work, kind of bringing all of those things up, and this is 3 years later, 2 years later, so they really like, your choices and the things you hold back, they do affect you later on.
When Stephanie pointed out to you that this was trafficking, in a little different way, but it is that. How does that land for you? Like, does that help you with putting a conceptualization on it that's a little different from the shame and self-blame?
Definitely. I think that was a kind of like a whoa moment for me when she said that. I I feel like I think it is a lot of self-blame. How did I get myself into this situation? How would I let someone do that? How could I let myself do that? Like, I know better. All those things kind of go into my brain, but it is something like I was like, that was someone I trusted, and that was I was manipulated into it, and I think that it is a lot. I mean, trafficking too is a scary word, so it's when you put that for someone, you trust or, like, someone you love, like, it does it hits a lot different because I think it's maybe, like, a more foreign word, like, I don't think that to me, like, before you said that, it would come into my social world like that, you know what I mean? But it is, it's present.
I want to say something because I think it's really important because Ches just said in a little bit of a different way, it's trafficking. It's not even in a little bit of a different way. This is actually textbook definition of trafficking. And I think it's really important that, we're talking about this because like you're saying, you don't think you're the kind of person that could be trafficked. And
Mhm.
this is textbook. This is the way it happens. Even when I talk about the porn star, porn actress that I was friends with, Cece, um, it actually happened through her boyfriend. And in porn, they see it really clearly because I think I think it's hard to see it as clearly as it is in certain areas of sex work. And again, I'm using sex work lightly because it's not as if you had sex. That is not what you did, but it was for the purpose of someone else's arousal, if we can say that. What they call it in porn is your pimp boyfriend. And that's exactly what
Yeah.
Andrew Tate taught. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was making money off of the sale of something of you, your body. It was for his personal gain. So that is not even a little different. That is textbook definition. And I think that we have to look at that because I spoke years ago on my other podcast to someone from the University of Connecticut or UConn, yeah, University of Connecticut, and he is like a he's on the police task force for trafficking, and he teaches a course there. And he said OnlyFans is really dangerous because it used to be that people used backstage or oh no, like Craigslist or whatever to solicit dons for escorts and things like that. And that was the police and the authorities were able to get into the back end of that back page or whatever it was called at the time, and also on Craigslist. He said, but OnlyFans, because it's a paid platform, the police cannot get behind it. So actually, traffickers have much more success using OnlyFans and doing exactly what this guy did. He's behind the scenes. But many, many young girls are brought into OnlyFans, and there is someone pushing the agenda and having them do that. So I don't want to diminish what happened to you because there are a lot of people that it's this easy. It's this simple. It's this,
Yeah.
oh, I have a crush on this boy. He's 2 years older than me. Oh, we're gonna make money together. Oh, whatever. And I had said to you before, and I just want to ask you again because we're doing this recorded, but the two of you made $100, whatever, which is actually pretty normal for OnlyFans. That's like what the average is. But now that you know the lingering negative emotions and icky feeling that you have, what price would have been good enough in order to go, it was worth it because I made enough money?
I think that's a very interesting question because I think obviously I'm sure there is enough money where I would be like, okay, yeah. But I don't think that I could ever like those feelings are still going to be there no matter how much money I make. And I think that's very common, especially with a lot of women in OnlyFans. Like I know a few of, my, friends from school that I know who also do OnlyFans and they, are doing it fully by themselves, which is, I think a little bit better than having someone else do it with you. But it's that same thing of, like, I think that they have those feelings of, "Oh, I'm still, having people pay me for this, and I don't think that you can ever really come to terms with that emotion because it's just it's not natural, I feel like. And that's another point too is that I think no matter like I think there's a way that people frame OnlyFans, especially women, and like being comfortable with it. This is how I framed it before I actually did it was well, since I'm already being sexualized, from society, might as well capitalize off of it. But at the same time, like you're, I don't even know, like promoting it. So it kind of just feels like this really terrible system.
So it's self-objectification, and I think that's what
Yeah.
feels icky.
That's a great way to put it, exactly.
I'm glad you said that. I'm sure there's a certain amount because I mean, if you walked away with $1 million, you'd probably be like, okay, maybe I could get over it. The
Mhm.
fact of the matter is, there's rarely a person who makes $1 million. And the fact of the matter is that there is still, even the girls I know who did porn or whatever, there is always going to be that lingering thought of who has what kind of picture of me. Because to be fair, I don't know. I don't know. You'd probably be able to tell us this. I don't know if they can take screenshots on their computer of what someone's seeing on the OnlyFans platform, but you can certainly pick up your camera and take a picture of what's on the
Yeah.
for sure. You know what I mean? And that's and again, you weren't doing some of the things that some people do on OnlyFans, but that is a little creepy to think that there's somebody who has your images.
Absolutely, and I think that's another thing, that lingers with me. Like, no matter how much money I make or I made, I will always have that fear, especially because it's like, it's years down the line now, but I'm going into a new career, I'm doing these things, and I don't like, that is a scary thought to have, like, someone may have seen me.
I'm really glad you had the thought to protect your face, and even though he pushed it, which is interesting, different level of manipulation. What was his, why would he not respect that boundary? Obviously, we know why, but good that you held your ground there, that you didn't want that. And I want to talk a minute about empowerment. Was there a point in the beginning where you felt empowered for a little bit and then it shifted, or did this pretty quickly feel, you know, yuck, like this doesn't feel right, this doesn't align with who I am? Or did it feel okay and then it shifted?
I think empowering is just the wrong word. I think it was exciting. Like I'm doing something in secret. Because I was living under my parents' roof at this time. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where I made this choice as an adult, but I was very much like I had like a little alter ego. Like it was exciting. But then, reality set in and I had to do this for months on end and constantly take photos of my body when I was, if I was feeling kind of, fat or like I wasn't feeling good about myself, I'd still have to make content. And that was something I didn't obviously enjoy, but it was like that pressure to keep going. And it would be him being like, hey, you need to send me 10 photos so I can post them. And that to me was like, oh, this is gross. This makes me feel terrible. And I think it started off like very much like fun and, wild and oh, I'm going to look back on this and think how crazy and, fun I was. But it really like it did a lot more damage than good. I keep saying that, but that is I think in the moment I was thinking this was going to be a good idea because he decided that it was, and now I'm looking back and I'm realizing he knew nothing.
And how did you guys end it? And did you end it? I'd love to hear what
Yeah.
your contact was with him after that, or if it was just done.
From the OnlyFans or like our relationship?
Both things. How did you
Yes.
say to him, "Okay, I'm done"? How did that work to end it? And then what was your relationship?
That's the thing. I mean, even before coming on this podcast, I was writing, a few points down just so I could, collect my thoughts. I cannot remember how it ended. I know that I think this is I think what happened. It was very hard for me to keep up with, posting content like that, and I think he got bored. We both just kind of were like I'm sure he got busy with school or whatever, but like it was a mutual, okay, like, I don't really wanna do this anymore, but I never expressed that to him. I never told him that all of it made me feel uncomfortable, and so I still had those emotions. And then I ended up dating him, like, a year later. He came to my college, he came to my school and, told me he was in love with me, and we dated for, like, a couple of months, and then he broke up with me and told me he wasn't in love with me. And so that really did a number on me, and I had to cut contact with him. I blocked him on everything, we don't speak anymore. But I'm so angry for so long, and I couldn't figure out why. Like, it's fine that he didn't love me, I'm okay with that. But I think it was just the level of, like, I did OnlyFans to make him like, I wanted him to love me. I literally would have done anything for this man, and I did. I literally did everything for him, and it wasn't enough. So I think that was the most defeating thing about all of this was my intention going into it wasn't even worth, the relationship that I had. So that was a lot to get over for sure.
So I'm actually just curious from Chez. Chez, I know I mentioned this before, but in my opinion, it kind of feels like I don't know whether it's like Stockholm syndrome, because if you're feeling bad after this happens, you have kind of icky feelings about it, and then you stay with somebody who is the perpetrator of those emotions. I feel like that falls under like trauma bond or Stockholm syndrome or something. Is that because there is an interesting like why would Sophie be attracted to staying with somebody who hurt her? I mean, maybe you didn't really articulate the hurt at that point, but it is interesting.
Think that I don't know, is the answer, but I feel like these kind of relationships, it's a slow bleed, it's a slow progression, and maybe it is trauma bonding, maybe it's many other things. I think you wanted to give him a chance, Sophie, is my guess, and I think, like you said, growing up as a people pleaser, what happens with people pleasers is independence and independent thought is kinda out the window, and we think that we can make someone happy, and we can, whether that's our parents first, and then it might be a significant other or a possible mate, and so there's this thing that if I do this and make him happy, then he'll validate me, and that's an old parenting paradigm that ends up showing up in our relationships because it's unhealed. That's what I feel this was probably playing out. And now you're to a new place of understanding this. And with that awareness, then you can say, okay, I can't make anybody happy. And that's not why I'm going to go into a relationship to make the other person happy so they like me. That's a very progressed stance for somebody that, is a people pleaser. And I'm one. I mean, a lot of women are. So I get it 100%. But that's what I think it was. And I think that he probably played the game that he was showing you affection when there's these little bids back and forth. And if there's a he's out of the picture and then he's showing you these little bids and you're like, oh, okay, that this might be great.
Mhm.
So that's what, because we don't I don't know. I do think you probably, Sophie, have PTSD type stuff from this. I think it's probably more than just feeling really yucky, but that there was trauma there. I don't know that it was like full-blown PTSD stuff, but that would be my guess because you were violated, manipulated, like all those things that when you realize later, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
that's why I couldn't remember. Like if you can't remember something, that's a little clue. That my bells go off when somebody says, I can't remember something significant, like how did this end? I think because you were just going through the motions, because you were continuing the trauma. That's my
Yeah.
guess.
I mean, I think that's really good insight. I mean, because I was diagnosed with PTSD, just like a separate thing with my father, and I think that maybe that's translating, maybe why I even got into that relationship in the first place, especially because he was someone I confided in with, because we were in high school together. He experienced all the things I was experiencing. He helped me through that. So I think I really like attached to him and attached to the idea of making that work with him just because we had been through so much and he had witnessed so much of my life, but that is no, you know, telling of who he is as a person and how he treated me. Those are 2 separate things.
Did your family ever meet him?
He did, yes.
Did they like him? Like, did he come across as like a nice guy?
Yeah, I think he was definitely a little bit more shy, and he always put a very big emphasis on impressing my family, and I always found that a little bit weird just because my family's so, like, just chill and not, like, you don't need to impress them, but he always would try and go the extra mile, and I think probably deep down he was trying to compensate, for all the stuff that was going on at the time.
Can I just go back to something about empowering? Because I think this is a really important, especially for this episode thing to talk about. People, especially women, and I'm sure guys, just to use it again, if somebody wants to traffic someone, it's really great to tell someone that this work you're going to do is empowering. But
Mhm.
if you know the definition of empowerment, it's that you have the ability to make choices for your own life. And it's really funny to me that we get this so confused. And I'm so glad you said empowering is probably the wrong word. It's absolutely the wrong word, but it's the word that is definitely used to manipulate women into doing things I think that don't necessarily align with their values or who they are or their wants. It's termed as something that's like we want to be sexually empowered, but this is like there's a lot of things that women do because people have put in their head that we're sexually empowering you. And I actually think it's the complete opposite. It's like actually kind of evil that like the
Yeah.
term is used to make you feel so it's gaslighting. It's literally 100% gaslighting.
Mhm.
And I think that we need to be really cautious when people say something's empowering. But like the term empowering is actually pretty much the complete opposite of what women are getting. A lot of times in hookup culture, from what I hear. And this is yet another example sex work. Sex work, well, I could go into a whole thing on sex work, which I won't. But I will tell you that it is for most people, there's no job that you could give me where you could say, hey, there's like a 75% likelihood that you're going to be sexually assaulted in this job. And there's like a 70% chance that someone's going to sexually manipulate and coerce you. That is completely the opposite of empowerment. And that
Yeah.
is what happens to most sex workers. And so it is not empowering. And I think women have to stop that lie. We have to stop buying into this lie. It is just
Yeah.
straight up gaslighting lie.
Well, and I think that that's a very important thing to express because it's exploitation. That's I feel like when you were saying that, that was the word that was ringing in my head. And I think that, you know, a lot of like sex work or just OnlyFans, everything is marketed, hookups as well. It's as this empowering thing to exploit women. And then women have the idea of, oh, okay, I'm empowering myself. I'm okay with this because I'm empowering. But that's not what's happening.
And Sophie, if you could have had a job that was utilizing your brains where someone still thought you were attractive and they were attracted to who you were rather than what you look like, all those days that you were like, I don't want to take a picture of myself, I don't feel good in my body, but you had to do it.
Mhm.
That's disempowering. That is not you controlling the outcomes of your life. You are literally like beholden to the customer, beholden to the person who's getting you to do that. That is a lot different than a job where you are recognized for who you are, whole person, rather than what you look like, and where somebody doesn't have the control to say that they want that of you. And I will go because it didn't happen to you, but I will say for all of the women who have been sexually assaulted, whether they're escorts or strippers or anything in the whole set, and I'm talking even OnlyFans. I know a girl who had an OnlyFans channel, and she actually had a lot of power because she came from porn, and then she was like, I'm going to take control, I'm going to empower myself, I'm gonna be start an OnlyFans channel. And she did it. And she had all of her boundaries. And within a month, because the subscribers, the people who subscribed that were paying her $9 a month, wanted to see more sexual activity, she ended up doing more and more and more and more and crossing all of her boundaries. That is not empowering. That's not
Yep.
empowering. That doesn't happen at a job. That does not happen at a legitimate job.
I think this is so important as the myth busting and empowerment versus extortion and the differences. And, I asked you that word and that isn't the right word, but I wondered if, because I do think that there's this, so often we hear from young people, I hear that they are like, no, I like hookup culture. I'm okay with it because it's empowering. It's me taking my power back sexually and with things like OnlyFans and whatever. But I don't think until you're down that road that you realize sometimes, oh shoot, this is the complete opposite of what I thought. So it's good to say this out front. And I like the differentiation because extortion is a really big word and that's the right word. And with empowerment, when you say things like he controlled all the passwords and it was all in his like there's nothing more non-empowering than that. Like he had those videos, passwords, like everything, and he got the money and then or had part of that or however that worked. But
Sure.
so this is helpful for people that are maybe considering it or have considered it because it certainly is popular. You're not alone in any of this.
And that was my main point though, was that OnlyFans or these, platforms are marketed so differently than the reality of the situation. I was told, and I still hear it, that you can make so much money on OnlyFans because you see these girls making so much money. But at the same time, it is such a small portion. And it really only like you said, only a couple of people, like everyone makes probably like $100. Like that's the baseline. And I think if a lot of people knew that going into it, they wouldn't do it because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and I think you very quickly move from wanting to be desired to feeling repelled by the fact that you've become objectified.
Completely.
Well, I'm so grateful for your honesty. If you could, maybe you want to wrap it up by saying, what if you had a little sister or a friend of yours at school, what would you tell them? And again, we're not in any way shaming any person who chooses to do OnlyFans,
Mhm.
but I think it's important to realize that why you get into it, know the actual truth of how you
Yeah.
may feel about it, and know that there may be better avenues to go down to make more money, to put your energy. Think about the time you had to spend to content create. You content created and you
Yeah.
made $100. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure with all the time you spent, smart, beautiful girl, you could have made a lot more money doing something else for those same amount of hours. So I think it's important. But anyways, feel free to say whatever you would say.
No, and I think I would say that I understand the feeling of wanting to feel accepted and doing something just because you want to feel good. You want to, but you have to explore why you want those things. And if there are outside factors, like I had an outside factor. If that is the case, don't do it. Like I think especially to like listen to your gut intuition. I think a lot of that, me being in this situation, I did not listen to myself. That's the main reason why I'm so upset is because I knew it was wrong. And so I think that a lot of women do that, and if you can stop and say, "No, I don't wanna do this," the worst thing that's gonna happen is you're not gonna do it. I think the first time that he asked me the question of, like, "Would you do this?" was, "Oh, whoa, I've never thought about that. I don't know if that's a good idea." But then he said, "Oh, but you would be really good at it." And so then I was like, "Okay, well, maybe." So I think it just continued on.
I hate those terms. I gotta tell you, I don't Dr. Chess can probably answer this, but there's a lot of people who manipulate a lot of other people by saying, "Oh, but come on, you'd be really good at this," or "So and so, that's what so and so thought, but she's making the." And it's like they try to have you override your gut instinct.
Absolutely, and I think that's another point too that I didn't realize it was manipulation because we would have these conversations of, "Oh, I wanna make sure you're comfortable. I wanna make sure that we're doing things so you're comfortable." But I was never comfortable. Obviously, I didn't voice that, but it was like, "Oh, like, let's see if would you be comfortable with showing your face?" I already told you I wasn't. There was certain things like that where that's manipulation. And I didn't register that because he was asking me if I was comfortable.
I'm so glad you just said that. I think that that alone, if you're young and somebody says that to you, I want to make sure you're totally comfortable.
Mhm.
That is such a great manipulation tactic, right, Dr. Chess?
Yes. So the biggest thing out of this last section that we're talking about is trusting your gut, because the words can be cagey and can be, yeah, very complimentary and all kinds of different things with gaslighting and people's motives. Maybe he thought you were going to make a million, not that that in any way, but I'm just saying we don't know anything about what his process was. But for you, when you have a gut feeling, we have to teach each other and support women in assessing our guts, and men too, but and really trusting that, because when something feels off, it is off. Like, we feel that energy first. So I feel like that's a huge thing that you said.
Like, legitimately, he was talking out of both sides of his mouth, right? Like, he was saying, I want to make sure you feel comfortable. And then when she had already laid down her boundaries, he said, are you sure you don't want to show your face? But she had already laid down that boundary. So it was
Right.
like he pretty much like was saying two things. You know what I mean? He's very much going in defiance of your boundary.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, he's then saying, but I want to make sure you're comfortable. Like, that's confusing coming out of
Yeah.
somebody who you like.
Absolutely, and I did recognize that as manipulation because, oh, he's using the word, "Am I comfortable?" So to me, that was, oh, he's making sure I'm okay.
It sounds like he cares, but he didn't. Yeah.
It's they can be so sneaky, but if you have that gut feeling, there is something wrong. Like, you had to explore that.
Okay, how are you truly empowering yourself these days and standing up for yourself and doing what you, not the people pleasing, but doing what you please?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that does kind of go from learning. I'm trying to educate myself on how what a healthy, relationship looks like, what healthy, activities are. I feel like hookup culture is something I used to participate in. I don't really, especially after experiencing, a situation like this, I do look at it, exploitate it, So I think reevaluating all of my or like socially acceptable things that I'm doing, are they actually benefiting me in the long run? I feel like is giving me, an empowering feline finally. And also just like I'm reading a book on people pleasing. And I think that is something too where I am gaining that knowledge and understanding so I can, learn from this and move forward and never have that happen again.
Sophie, I'm really happy with where you are today. And it is, with recovering, I'm sure from the books you're reading and stuff, recovering from this kind of mindset of more people pleasing and more external validation versus the internal. It is baby steps. And you doing this podcast and sharing your work and all that you're learning and all those things are steps along the way to feel really an inner security where you're not going to go into relationships wanting them to give that back to you because you've already got it.
Exactly.
And I have one last question for you. You started out this entire podcast saying that you were looking for validation. Do you have any new ways that you find validation without needing it from someone else?
I do a lot of self-reflection, like, I journal, and I think that's a really good way for me to validate myself because and it's not just bad things that happen, like, anytime I have an achievement, I write down, my little story or whatever, and I look back on it, and I look back, that's the main thing is, "Wow, okay, that's awesome I did that," and that is very validating to me because I think there are a lot of negative experiences I've been through, but there are also a lot of positive experiences, and I think that is so very validating to highlight those, at least for myself.
Thank you. I love that. I'm glad I asked you that.
Yay.
Thank you for joining us today, Sophie. This was a powerful and important conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I got to share my story and hopefully, that reaches out to some people because I do feel like it's very common and it makes me very sad.
Sophie, I feel like the learning that came out of this is like a big I'm my only fan. We are your fans too. But I mean, that's an important piece. And this whole cultural thing of we need other people to like, all that stuff
Mhm.
that's the deeper picture too. So thank you for illuminating all of this. It's big.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for also, giving me so much insight too. I really appreciate it. This was very helpful for me.
Yay.
All right. Have a great day, Sophie. Okay, welcome to the wrap up. Thank you so much for listening to Sophie's story and being here to hear what Dr. Shez and I have to say. I'm gonna hand this over to Dr. Shez and let her start.
Gosh, that was really, really powerful. I think this is a topic we need to explore more and more because you and I keep hearing how OnlyFans is just rising to the top of platforms for people to use. And so interesting that no money's made. That might be surprising to people. It was surprising to me, the little amount of money for kind of exposing and sacrificing yourself. I think this is a podcast episode about codependence. I think it's about exploitation versus empowerment. I think it's really important these days that we teach young people, male and female, about the signs of codependency and how to kind of overcome that. Because I think that young relationships are often codependent. And then those things can carry on into adulthood. I know many, many women, I'm one myself, that have been in codependent relationships for a very long time because we think that our identity is wrapped in the relationship. We feel as women, particularly, a need to please or a need to kind of subjugate our desires and needs and wants for another person. And this is a perfect example of that happening. And Sophie knew that her gut was telling her something. Her gut was telling her from the very beginning, she said, that this didn't feel right, but she went against that. So we've talked a lot about that in the episode, but I think I just want to remind people of that. The signs of codependency I want to go over real quick. They may seem obvious, but then there's obviously subtle ones too. If you have a difficult time setting boundaries, or as Sophie said, having those boundaries listened to and respected, that might be a sign. If you don't trust yourself or you're not even sure of your own needs and wants, I hear that a lot from older client women, in their 50s, 60s, that say the words, I don't even know what I want. They've been so long subjugating their wants and needs that they don't even know what they want. So that's a process of really knowing what you want. If you start to feel kind of anger, hurt, fear in the relationship, either side, from the other person or within yourself, that could be a sign. If you start to feel extreme guilt for your behavior and things that you're not doing enough, or if you say the words, if I only blank, blank, blank for this person, that might be a sign. If you ignore your gut or your own self-conscious, that's a possible sign. If you have a high need for external validation, low self-worth, your identity is wrapped in the relationship, and there's this control factor. If you feel you're being controlled, that's an immediate red flag to be like, okay, this can go down a really, really bad road. If you're neglecting your own needs and not really having an outside support system, a lot of times in codependent relationships, outside support systems get cut off. So you want to pay attention to that. So I want to go to the fixes because I think that's really important. There are wonderful, wonderful books on codependency. I have often recommended Codependent No More, which has been around forever, but it's a really kind of the gold standard of codependency. That's a great one. But there are newer books. There are lots of other books. But a way to get beyond this, and Sophie really helped us with this, is to start to listen to the gut, number one. Start to learn your boundaries and your no's and be okay and practice saying no outside of the relationship. Practice saying no in any way possible. And then it makes it easier in the relationship. having self-care time and really nurturing yourself, that's a way to start to assess, "Hey, what do I need? What do I like? What do I want?" Increase your support system. Counseling, I always recommend, of course. If it's not counseling, any kind of group, there's Codependent No More. I mean, not Codependent No More. There's Codependence Anonymous, which is free, just like AA and NA. And really, start to look within for yourself and assess, is this relationship healthy for me? And it could be a parent-child relationship, it could be a love relationship, it could be a friendship, it could be any kind of relationship that you start to feel there's control and you're losing yourself and your identity.
I think for myself, I think it's really important, you know, and I stressed this in the episode, that we recognize trafficking for what it is. The trafficking, like the boyfriend aspect of bringing someone into work where they are making money off of you, while it wasn't the obvious, capitalizing on someone's vulnerability. There was a vulnerability in that Sophie had a crush on him. So I think, that becomes a power that someone has over you, obviously. Did he know that? I cannot venture to say, but I think you as the individual, if you are in that sort of power dynamic with somebody, just realize that that is some sort of control that they have over you. I think Dr. Shez and I can both, identify or relate to that, being young, being having a crush on someone and letting them have an undue amount of power over us. I'd also like to just encourage people to think about the difference between desire versus objectification, something that we talked about in the show. I think that's really important to know that, wanting to be desired is a natural feeling, it's a natural emotion. We want people to like us. It leads to a lot of things. But in this way, it led to Sophie crossing a lot of her boundaries. And once she did, she was in a situation where people desired her for sure, but it felt very objectifying. And I think that's when there's money, it just kind of starts to feel very icky. So, something to, again, think about. And I guess the last thing is I would like to ask Dr. Shez, what you think about Sophie's desire to feel validated or to feel validation in who she was. How do young people find validation in their life when it's not through relationship? Because I think a lot of people look for that validation in relationship. And I know, being a 55-year-old woman, that that doesn't come from relationship. It really comes from within. But how do you seek that when you're young?
I think that having another person, mainly a therapist who's trained to kind of help you, if you haven't had that growing up, if you didn't get that, we develop our self-concept, whether that's an internal locus of control, self-concept.
What does that
So
mean? Before we go too far, what does a locus of control mean?
what that means is that your compass is an internal compass versus an external compass. I'll say compass instead of locus of control, meaning that you know your needs, you know your desires, you know your conscious, you know your morals, you know your values, you know your internal systems for yourself, you know who you are, you know where your boundaries are, you know your agency, all the things you talk about. You feel secure in that. And it's not always, but you have a general grounding in your sense of self. If you don't have that secure sense of self, and there's many reasons, but oftentimes, and we all mess up as parents, but oftentimes, I'm not even going to say the words mess up, but we miss the mark, right? And so oftentimes we use achievement as an external locus of control. I'm okay if I achieve. If I get A's, then I'm liked, then I'm worthy, then I'm good. Or if I'm cute, if I'm good looking, then I'm good. Those are all external locus of controls. If I make someone happy, if my parent is happy, then I'm happy. That's an external locus of control. And that's where codependency starts, is with the parent-child relationship. And then it just continues until you consciously change it. So at any age, and I'm so happy that Sophie's at her age changing this, at any age, you can change it and you can consciously say, no, I'm not going to look outside to my worth. I'm going to look inside and I'm going to validate myself and work to do that.
I think what you're saying is from the time you are young, and even if you don't have it when you're older, it's look inside for the answer. And the answer, you have to trust yourself. And when you begin to trust yourself, whether that's as a child, your parent is saying to you, what do you think? How do you think you can solve this or whatever? You begin to build a self confidence. And I like what you're saying that it's not external because, like, I would have said before I asked you that, like, oh, is it being a good athlete? Is it being all of those things? But I like that it's more going inside, knowing who you are and trusting your instinct. And you're going to have to build that, I suppose. And I think that's hard if you come from a family where there maybe are people who have questionable values or don't even have their own sense of,
Yeah.
self. That
Yeah.
has gotta be very hard. So it's just something to be aware of. Do I look inside for my validation? Do I understand things? Do I really have a strong north, a place I'm going, a feeling that I have, or do I not? And if I don't, that's okay. Build it.
Build
Learn.
it.
Learn
Yeah.
how to get strong in your convictions. Know what you're about and try not to find that through external achievement or other people.
Yes. There's very cool research on this stuff, but we're wrapping it up, but we will talk more about this. But yes, this is a learned skill. This can happen at any age.
Maybe there's a great book we can add to the resources for people in this way is how to
Sure.
build your own locus of control, your own
Yes.
moral compass, I guess. I don't even know that it's moral, but
It's
it's your
not
own
just
compass.
moral,
It's
it's
a values
value.
compass. Yeah.
Your worth and value outside of anything external, knowing that you without anything are of value.
Awesome. So
All
we'll put
right.
that in the resources. Thank you so much for listening. And we will join you again next Sunday at 7 a.m.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of 7 on Sundays.
The 7 on Sundays podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Chez Leeby and Stephanie Boye based on our experience. It also shares the stories, behaviors, and opinions of our guest that we do not necessarily condone or view as healthy. 7 on Sundays is an open forum to discuss what is happening with our listening audience. Some names and details of our guest stories have been changed to protect their anonymity. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you are in crisis and in need of mental health support, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is free and confidential.
Join the conversation and connect with us through our website, 7onsundays.com. That's the number 7onsundays.com. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Thank you and be well.